So with that, let me introduce our first presenter. Our first session, which will go until about 10:30, is Implementation Looking Back, Best and Worst. Our speaker is Janice Christopher. She's the Systems Librarian at the University of Connecticut. She received her MLS from the University of Texas and worked as a monographs cataloger and systems in a consortia office before coming to UConn. She was one of the co-chairs overseeing UConn's migration to ALMA and PRIMO in 2014-2015. And with that, I will switch it over so she can share her screen. Oh, sorry about that. Why can't I stop sharing my screen? There we go. Okay, take it away.
Okay, can you see my screen? And can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see your screen yet.
Okay, here we go, share. Got to click share. Okay, are we good?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. I realized that I changed the title accidentally to Implementation Looking Back, Good and Bad, but it really is a best and worst. I don't think I'm going to tell you anything that you don't already know. You guys are professionals. You're I'm sure doing great work on this migration, but when you're in the middle of migration and it's panicky and crazy and there's too much work and you're still trying to do your regular job, sometimes we have trouble remembering that. So part of this presentation is guidance, and part of it's just flat out cheerleading. I wanted to give you a little bit of background before I started about UConn and about our setup before we moved to ALMA and PRIMO. UConn is reasonably good sized. We were a Voyager system, or a Voyager for over 15 years. We used Summon for discovery, and when we made the decision in 2014 to go to ALMA, we started in October of 2014 and we went live in July of 2015. So we've been live now for about 3.5 years. Now, when I was putting this presentation together, I thought, okay, how do I want to handle this? And I went back through some of my notes and I realized I wanted to focus on a few things we had done really well and a few things that we did pretty badly. Not to put too fine a point on it. So I'll move faster through the good things, and then we'll spend more time on the bad things, because that's where the real learning happens. The first thing that was good was the data move, and I, of course, can't take credit for this. I think Ex Libris did a really good job of moving our data. We did not have any major data issues. One thing, of course, you need to remember, because we've all heard scary stories about data moves, is that you are the person who is, or you are the people who are responsible for verifying the correct transfer of your data. Ex Libris isn't involved in this. Now, it may not, because systems aren't a one-to-one correlation, it may not all go in the place where you want it to go. But Ex Libris will at least tell you where everything is going. The good part about this is that your data, once you get it into ALMA, will just look different because it's in a new package, and that will help you spot problems when you're verifying your data. And we had a very small and overworked implementation team, as I'm sure everybody does, and we could have spent much more time reviewing data, but I developed a theory, which I have no base for, but I developed a theory that big problems would appear sooner rather than later. So, review your data, but at some point, quit driving yourself crazy and say, okay, minor scares were handled appropriately. We did have some minor data scares, and there will be some. You'll see a list of a few there. We had different ways of approaching a fix. You know, was it easier to fix it in Voyager and ALMA? Was a manual fix going to be better than a batch fix? And I could talk more about those during the Q&A if you so desire. Just remember that there will be cleanup. You are migrating your data, you're pouring it from a square box into a round box, and there will be cleanup. Another thing I think we did really well was engage the staff in the project and do a good job of communicating in the pre-go live phase. As soon as we had the contract signed, we had an all staff meeting where I talked about cool things that Alma could do and called it a cool new toy. And yeah, there were some staff who were not excited about the migration, but I think on the whole, most of them were. There was an acknowledgement library-wide that that while Voyager was a good system, it was no longer meeting the library's needs. So people couldn't wait in to get Alma and do some learning. We did different kinds of communication. We communicated through email. We had all staff meetings. We had smaller team meetings. I met individually with people sometimes, or small little groups would meet. We didn't use Slack or Trello because I don't think the library was using those tools at that point, but those would be other good tools. The point is that you can't communicate too clearly or too often. And your communications tend to fall into these 4 little groups. And you don't have to be communicating anything earth-shattering. You may just be saying it was a good call with our implementation manager this week, and we learned this. But it helps underline the process of change and the successes that the team is having. Your staff will want to know how the project is going, so be sure to tell them. I heard lots of people tell me, and other members of the implementation team, that they really liked finding out what was happening. The last thing that we did really well that I'm going to talk about is setting realistic goals for day 1. You're not going to become an Alma ninja by go live. There is just no way. It is too large and too complex a system. What you want to do is have a plan so that all library staff can do the work that they spend most of their time doing on the first day. So CERT can check books out and in, and catalogers can catalog, and acquisitions can create PO lines and place orders. People should be able to sit down and work the first day that you're live on Alma. Catalogers don't need to know how to do bound widths the first day. They can just make sure that they can catalog. I think we did a good job of preparing people for this. The other thing that you want to have for day 1 is that all of your basic Alma configurations and integrations are correct. Now, there are some things that you can't test until you go live, and there may be outliers which will turn up eventually. We had a 2-hour reserve checkout period that hadn't made it into a fulfillment unit that we didn't discover until a month later. But that sort of thing will turn up, and you'll cope with it when it turns up. And of course, this is what you're working on with your implementation manager prior to go live, is making sure that your locations are there, your new fulfillment units and terms of use are there, your reporting codes and your funds and ledgers are there. Everything's present. Everything's what you need. And all staff should know how to report problems that first day and that first week and ongoing. Designate a reporting tool, whether it's an email or something like a ticketing system, so that they know, so people know how to use it, and they can report problems. So those are some of the things we did well. And we're going to stay on day one here, because I'm going to talk now about the things that we did not do well. We did have a mechanism for staff to report problems, and people did use it. And when you go live, there are going to be issues reported, simply because it's a new look for everybody. They're live, they're more alert, they see things and they're like, oh, what's this? This looks wrong. We had problems with triaging issues that were reported and our post-go live communication. We didn't have a clear priority list for triage, so we didn't know in which order we were going to address problems, and we didn't effectively communicate activity on those problems or their resolutions. Sometimes people would get an email and sometimes they wouldn't, and all that kind of thing. We were juggling a lot of stuff. I don't want to scare you too much about day one. Day one is probably going to be pretty smooth, and I have to say that ours really was, in terms of people getting in and being able to work. But they see things and they see things and they want to report them. Now, of course, we were really busy dealing with different things and the stuff that we couldn't test until go live and everything. And I felt even worse because most people appreciated the work that the implementation team was doing. But we didn't have a good thing for triage. We didn't have a good plan for triage, and overall our communication fell into a black hole once we'd gone live. Everything that people were submitting seemed to be more important than communicating to the staff what was going on. So I wasn't terribly happy about that in retrospect. To do it better, I'd make sure I had a list of priorities for triage. Maybe you want to deal with public facing, patron inhibiting things first, like people, can't log into their library accounts or something. Then maybe issues that are interfering with basic staff work. There's missing reporting codes, and then maybe everything else, which is you can either rank more of it or you can just do it in the order it was received. It would be a good idea to have a management tool, and I think Trello would be perfect for this, that all staff can monitor and they can see what's happening with the problems, and they can see the move from being worked on to resolved. You communicate the triage priorities and the Trello URL to staff. Staff were really, they were understanding that we wouldn't get to that not all the problems are number one in priority to solve. Your staff will give you a lot of credit in that area. You should probably designate one person the communicator, and this person is going to handle all of the information flowing to and from the implementation team. I've heard a number of presentations about successful implementations, A number of them have stressed that they had a communicator on their team from the beginning who was responsible for handling all the communication. We did not have someone like that. We should have had one for at least this day one or week one period, where when things were kind of hectic and you know, if the technical people don't have to worry about communicating with the staff, then I think that whole part can go smoother. And we want this person to keep the larger implementation communication flow going as well. You know, we cataloged our first book, we ordered our first DVD, you know, continue to let people know the successes so they can also enjoy them, because, you know, they've also been the staff in general have been anticipating this for months. So share the wins with them. Another thing we did badly was something I'm calling functionality inertia. And a system migration, as you know, or as you're experiencing maybe for the first time, it means a new interface, it means new functionality, it means new vocabulary. There are lots of changes for people to process and assimilate. And it's flat out a lot of change. And even the people who are excited about it and ready to move ahead are going to be kind of overwhelmed with all the difference that there is. We all tried a mantra of do it the way Alma wants it done. Thinking of you know, moving from our Voyager environment into our Alma environment. But in many areas, we didn't do a good job of adapting to Alma or implementing and adopting new functionality or revisioning workflows. It's tough to have so much change and then be thinking of these other things on top of that. There were several instances of workarounds to copy Voyager workflows, and I will admit that I was one of those people. I handled withdrawals for the library, and I kept doing it the way we've done it in Voyager, and it took me a couple of years to get to the point where I could change and do it the way Alma wanted it done. And we still had actually a couple of paper-based workflows, and those didn't transition well in part because there was no system model to compare them to. So here's how I do it better. And I'm going to say first that I'm not sure that you can do it better, because this is extremely difficult. As I said, even for people who are excited and engaged, it's a lot of transition. Now, that said, I'm going to say that there was one person on our staff, one of our financial services people, who made the most impressive complete transition to Alma of anybody on the staff. She had her notebooks, she had her screenshots, she had her notes, and she was in Alma and ready to go. But most people, like I said, it was more difficult. You know, migration is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to begin again, and you can clean up historical messes. You can rationalize or standardize things that have proliferated over the years. We went from 403 physical locations to 175, and I was so proud. To improve on what you're doing, you can improve on what you're doing now. Probably the best thing you can learn during the migration is to say, that's the way Alma does it. Because you can use this as a tool. You think you've got too many reserve loan periods? Oh, well, Alma only allows us to have 5 reserve loan periods. Sorry, that's the way Alma works. I didn't do anything quite that sneaky, but I got close a couple times. What I would say is do the best you can in terms of doing it the way Alma wants it done. but just sit down right there on your go live date and write on your calendar that you're going to revisit your post-migration workflows in 9 months or a year. That will give people a chance to become familiar with ALMA, to understand better how it works, and then maybe they'll really be prepared to change workflows and to adopt new functionality. And we've done this, and I think we've actually done it pretty well in a couple of areas. And of course, if there are features you want to implement, they're new and exciting features, make a list, and when the go live dust settles, you can start implementing. The last thing I want to talk about that we didn't do very well was PRIMO. And I feel I take personal responsibility for this because I feel that I did not set it up well. We didn't really prepare our public services people for the disappearance of the Voyager OPAC, which worked like an OPAC. We didn't think of what it would be like for staff moving all library searching to discovery. Most of them had not been using Summon, and certainly known item searching in PRIMO is a different experience than known item searching in Voyager was. We didn't work hard enough to engage our public services people with PRIMO during implementation. And we didn't do a great job of informing our patrons about the change. We did okay. I was not pleased with the communication that went out because it said the search would be new and better and all those kinds of hyperbolic words. And I just wanted them to say that search would be different, because I think deep down I knew that that people weren't going to experience this in a positive way, at least not to start with. But I didn't win that battle, unfortunately. So here's how I would do it better. And it's something I didn't do in this presentation, as you've probably noticed. Make sure that you put as much emphasis on PRIMO as you're putting on ALMA. If you're moving to PRIMO for the first time, make sure that it's as much attention as ALMA does. Engage champions from your public services staff, either people who enjoy discovery searching or who are willing to take the professional responsibility on selling PRIMO to the staff. You need to prepare guides to help both staff and public transition from the OPAC to the discovery search, and take staff training seriously. Make sure that your public services people treat it the same way that they would if they were getting a new database product and needed to learn how to search it effectively. And do as much as you can ahead of time to improve single box keyword searching for it to give you the kind of results that you expect. I have one more extra here about letters and printing. This is the extra warning. Do not leave letters and printing till the very end. We did, and don't do that. As far as is practicable, you want to clean up the letter XML and the constant data beforehand. Now, you can't test letters before go live, unfortunately, but you can do a lot of work. You don't want to send every letter that there is, and you want to make sure that you identify the ones that you need that are part of your workflow, for example, for overdues and lost materials, and disable everything else. You can always enable them later. Expect the unexpected with letters and printing. We had a lot of old finds in the database that had been turned over to the bursar's office, and we had never heard if they were cleared or not. People would have to show up with a receipt. Well, when that first run of the overdue and lost fine fee jobs ran, it sent letters to every user that had a fine in the system, even if the fine had been paid years ago, and we just never found out about it, because as far as Alma's concerned, those are all new fines. This, depending on your procedures, this may not be a problem for you, but be aware that stuff like this can happen. Have your IT group understand and accept how printing works in Alma. Printing works with its printing means Alma sends an email. Get your IT people on board with this and be ready to implement. There's good advice on the list on how to set up various different approaches to setting up printing in Alma. That's all I have. I will go to the Q&A.
Yes. So we have a couple of questions for you. Actually, we have one question that's just general housekeeping, and I forgot to address it at the beginning. Someone wanted to know if the recording will be available of the sessions later, and it will be. So all of these sessions are being recorded, and they will be available on the SUNYLA website, sunyla.org, in a couple of weeks. We're going to edit it and make sure everything looks nice. We had a question. Actually, Carol, I wasn't sure if this question was for me or for Janice, or for someone else. How did you use the workflows which you were told by Ex Libris to create? They created workflows, and afterward no one said anything about them. But Carol, I wasn't sure who that was for.
Is this workflows or work orders?
Workflows.
Workflows. Okay. Ex Libris talked to us about coming up with workflows, adapting our older workflows to Alma. That's entirely on you, because they don't know what your workflows are. So you have to sit down and decide how you're going to work in Alma based on how it works, how it needs to work, and you have to implement that yourself. And I don't know if that answers the question or not.
And we're starting to get like a flood in of questions, so we're actually running really close to time. Ooh, okay.
Oh, I see that.
Whole bunch of questions are coming in. So what I would recommend, for those of you whose questions we're not going to get a chance to answer right now, please feel free to email Janice. Her email is up on the screen.
Yes,
and she'll be happy to answer those questions for you. Unfortunately, we're running really close. Let me see if we can get a quick one. Linda wanted to know, can you please clarify paper-based workflows and provide an example?
We still had our acquisitions processes were still largely paper-based. We had never really used Voyager for acquisitions the way you were supposed to use it. So that workflow was being ported into Alma, and it still remains somewhat paper-based. We have since done some revision.
Sorry, I'm trying to answer some of these questions in the Q&A. Because I don't think we're going to get to most of these questions.
Oh, because I scared somebody with something I said.
Yes, I think there might have been a couple of those. If you're able to answer those,
yes.
In the meantime, we'll move on to our next presenter. In the meantime,
Mary asked about a limit of 5. You mentioned a limit of 5 loan periods. No, there's not a limit of 5 loan periods. What I was rather hand-handedly trying to use as an example was if there's something that you want to rationalize, you can use Alma as an excuse to rationalize it. No,
like
Alma
if people are fighting you on it, you can.
Yeah, Alma doesn't have any limits, but you can say, oh, sorry, we can only have 5 reserve loan periods. And that way, people will grumble, but they say, okay, well, then we'll decide which the 5 most important reserve loan periods are. It's kind of a sneaky trick, but if you've got things that are way out of hand, you might want to try something like that.
All right. Well, Janice, thank you very much.
Other people, feel free to email me.
Yes, please email her if you have any further questions. We have to move on to our next presentation.
Okay, I will click stop share.
Sure, and I will share mine.
And there you go.